So today we'll see how to read a CSV file, and we'll cover the basics of Maven, and we see how to import the additional libraries using Maven, and we'll set up the Maven environment in a local, and we'll try the same CSV using the third-party libraries. So this would give a starting for our Maven project. With this, we'll be speeding up the other things also on the Maven part. So Maven, what is Maven is all about? Have you ever heard this Maven term or Gradle, something like this?
Maven, I have heard we used to like Artifactory. It's for storing our jar file, right? So Maven is used to build that jar file.
Yeah, true. So this is like a project object model. So it's like whenever right now we have all the APIs and the dependencies, everything within the Java APIs, right? So if you want something from list, we go and take it from Java util. If you want something from file related, we go and take it from Java NIO or Java IO package, right? So similarly, these are all something which is given by JVM. Instead, if you want something like more advanced and more performability APIs, which are available as an open source or something which is licensed, we can get it and we can use them in our application. But what was the earlier approach? So once you share the screen, I can tell you where these libraries would be there in our system.
Okay. Actually,
So these libraries are something which will be like either jar, or it can be as var, or it can be as EAR. So what is the difference between jar, var, and EAR? So we'll see that. Let me share my screen to just quickly give an intro about this. And then
Neha,
we'll
before that, like last class, you told the tree entrant lock. We will see it in the next class actually. So are we continuing that, or
Yeah, we'll see that. We'll see that. Basically,
Okay.
I wanted to learn the CSV reading because we just heard about the text file part, right? So we'll be seeing how to read a CSV file using the Java APIs as well as using the third-party libraries. And with that, and because using threads, right, we'll be doing the similar programming using the threads. So in that case, you might need to write or read a file and using thread concepts. So I need the basic of this to be covered so that we can cover on the other concepts of threads parallel.
Okay. Like, give me 2 minutes because my Zoom desktop Zoom.
Yeah, fine. That should be no problem.
So
I can cover up the core concept about these Maven thing. And by the time once you get it ready, we can start working on it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we have something called Maven, and which is being provided from the Apache, okay, which is nothing but a build tool, okay. What does it build? It builds your Java application as a package. So this package is something called as jar. Okay. Usually we can name it as jar. There are three varieties of archives. So this jar is expanded as Java archive file. And there is an EAR, which is enterprise archive. And the one var is web archive. Okay. So what is the difference between this jar, EAR, and var? Where do we use this? This is something which we need to know as we start looking into the web application development in a week or so. When we start, we need to get an idea about these things, how we package it. So what happens whenever right now we are all working on single Java applications, we are deploying it, we are getting a .class file. So the same thing. So single Java file is compiled, then you get single .class file, right? But in case of n number of Java files, okay, which are all grouped with different packages, and all this has to be grouped into number of classes, but you can't execute all the classes separately. You have to group them in a single root or single umbrella, right? So that is what we bring it as jar. So we are actually archiving all the classes in a single file and executing only the jar and not the class. So whenever you wanted to execute specific class file from this, you can execute the command. You can use like Java -jar and a specific file name .java, okay, or .class, okay. So this way what happens, a specific function of specific class would be executed. But if you want to execute the entire .class files which are interconnected together as an entire program, then we just execute this particular jar. Say let's say it's to-do file. So to-do.jar. So this would be the structure for you to execute it. So So this would be the way we'll be grouping the Java classes into a jar. So where we build everything as a combined package, single package, and post that we'll be using this jar to run our application. Okay. So same thing, what is EAR and var. So let me come into the var. So var is nothing but web archive, right? So what does a web look like? So if you go to Chrome, you open a browser. The Chrome is a browser, and where you can see any web page or websites getting launched, right? So how does that web page look like? It is built on HTML, which has some CSS files, which has some content, static content. Then it has some kind of JavaScript code, which is used for your client-side evaluation. So all these are together present in your front-end view. And the back-end, you have your back-end program, and the back-end program might be connected to any database. And this can be deployed in any kind of Tomcat server or any Glassfish server or something. Okay, so this particular package is said to be a web application. So you can see, say example, if you open Chrome and if you type facebook.com, what happens? You get a view of Facebook page, and in that Facebook page, whenever you try to evaluate your login part, in the backend, there will be some API or any Java code or any Python code which validates your credentials. And if it is like you're already an existing user, then we go into the database, check the credentials are valid. Only then you give a response. So how this looks like is, so you have your website here. You have your database here. Let's say we have a middleware code here. This is your front end or GUI. Let's have it as GUI. And let's say this is your database.
Sneha, I could see your notepad only actually. Are you drawing in?
Oh, you're not able to see the paint? Just
yes.
You're able to see now?
Yes.
Okay. So let's say this is your GUI, which is nothing but a facebook.com. And here you're just going to login page. So now when you click on the login page, how does that page look like? I'm just giving a rough diagram. So which will have username and password, and you're going to give login button. This is what a normal view look like. And for this view, you have something blue color, red color, white color, whatever combinations of colors, and CSS, like the username can be in a normal font, or it can be italic, or it can be both bold and italic, whatever combinations, right? So all these are like the add-on culture, add-on color, which is giving you a better view for your page. But the main thing, what is happening, you give some username and you give password. I need to just do validate whether this is the right combination and not. That is the thing, I'm going to do it. So as a developer, so say like what are the steps we need to think as a developer? Okay, first thing. So this involves your system design. So just tell me what all things you will consider. The first thing, if it's a new user, right? You will have it as a new user. If it's a new user, he will not have username, password, anything. So he's a fresh user. So in that case, what we need to do, we need to give sign up link. So where he can register himself and then create credentials to log in your FB. This would be the first scenario. Now, the second scenario, existing user, someone who already created the account in your Facebook. So what happens? He already has credentials. So now he's trying to log in. So on login, the first scenario would be giving right username and password. That if that is done and if it is validated, okay, then he can be success. Okay. Now, what if so what if the second scenario, he is giving some mismatched misinputs, okay, wrong inputs for username and password. So what you have to return, you have to return something called try with right credentials. Okay, but we need to restrict the control, right? How many times he can go and try the different. So it's like hacking. So you need to restrict your access. Like you can't access more than twice or more than thrice. Something we need to give some control on our side to restrict the access. So for that purpose, what we can do, the number of attempts. So the number of attempts he can consider, we can limit it to say 5 or 10 or however you want, we can limit it whenever he tries this with that time frame. Okay, so if he's doing for today, and if he goes more than 5 or 10 attempts, we can give a message like your time limit has been exceeded and you have given number of attempts already, so please try to log in little later. See, there might be a scenario where someone have forgot the username and password. They have to reset the password. So we can give reset password if they are people who are like forgot the username and password. So these are the major scenarios which we cover as part of login as a backend developer in Java code. Okay. Do you have any questions so far in this use case?
No, Sneha.
Okay. So what happens now in the front end view? Okay. So what in the front end view, what we do is the username and the password, we have client validations, like he can give inputs only like kind of text or alphanumeric or special characters, what kind of things he can give, and what if he gives less than 6 characters, some kind of validations, right, to at least make the user to work for the, to come at least to the middle of this, not even going DB, at least to make a call to middleware. So what we do, we use this client validations to just whether this user exists or not, whether he's giving the right things or not. All basic validations we do in the client level using JavaScript and CSS and HTML. Once this is done, once they say now he's the user who already registered and he's trying to log into the system. So now the first attempt, he's logging with the username and the password provided. So now when he clicks on the login button, right, you need to send a call to the backend saying that you got a request to validate whether he's the right user, whether the credentials are particularly true, we have these credentials in the database or not, all these things we need to perform. So what happens now, the control will be taken from here to the middleware. So once you get all the inputs, necessary inputs, we'll be hitting the middleware. So how do we hit the middleware system? So what happens here again? So make sure you understand the flow, because once we start doing web applications, we need to get this idea. So in the web application flow, what happens? We have login as an endpoint. Okay, I'm just giving a /login because you're giving /login here. So I have a control here as /login. So now when the user comes in, what are the inputs I need as part of the /login? So I need the username. Let's say the username is string, okay? And I have a string password. Okay. Now the thing is, I need to check the username is null or empty or something like before going into normal Java code. So I'm going to give validate method, and which is accepting string username and string password. Now within this, what I'll do is I'll do normal null check if username not equal to null and the password not equal to null. And you should also check whether it is the length of the username is greater than 0, because some people, what they do, they just give username as U, password as A, something like that, when you don't have the client validations in your front end. So you have to make sure that your length is also greater than what you're thinking of to have as a username and password length, right? Or that is also a kind of functional requirement. So then you say a username dot length is greater than 4 minimum, and the password dot length is greater than 6. This is my criteria. Now let me go in. Okay. So what will I do? First, I once I get this username and password, I need to have a connection to database. Okay. So we'll see how to connect to DB in the upcoming classes. But before that, we have a connection to DB. So the DB table name is login table. And this table has something called username as a column, password as the column, and then login time as one column, and the number of attempts he took to login, that would be, and if he has he reset the password for the first time, like it's not the username and password which you give for the first attempt, right? It's something he has to reset. So it is password reset. And then the mail ID to confirm. Yeah, these are the columns you have in the backend. Now, what will I do? Once I get the username and password from the user, I go do normal Java query, DB query, select star from login where username, okay, the username which I have given as a column. Okay, and I think it's not visible. Let me keep it here. So select star from login where uname is equal to the username which you received, and the password is again something which you receive from the front end. So if you get select star from, means there's a count. If you want to validate the count, you can validate count. If there's exist, you can do exist. I'm just giving select star so that what happens, my result count should be 1. So if I get count 1, that particular user credentials are true. So I can allow him. I can give the status as true. But if I don't have the count as 1, or if I have more than one count with a similar name, or these kind of things, right? Then I have to add one more additional check. I need to, after giving the username and password, I need to also evaluate something called as email ID by taking it from the user input data, user data. So this is not like I do every time. Only if there is any common conflict, like they have duplications, then what I can do is I can validate with some other column name to avoid that duplicacy. So finally, I need to get the count. If my count is 1, I can allow that particular user and return the value as true. So what I'll do here in this validate method is I give it as a Boolean. So the method is Boolean validate. So what I'll do after doing this logic check, if my, now I'll have a check like, if my count is equal to 1, return true, else return false. So this is a very simple logic. I'm giving you an idea. So this is the Java code, right? So this entire logic is available in login.java file. So this is nothing but login.java file. And whatever you're trying to execute from the front end would be in login.html, and you have login.css, and you have login.js. Some 3 files you have in the front end. In the back end, you have login.java. Now, since we are using login table, let's say this is an Oracle DB. And in this DB, I have called login table. So I need to have some script or connectivity program, right? So for that, I have something called. So here I have login.java to evaluate the logic, the business logic. Okay. Now what will I have here is I have login DB connectivity .java file. Okay. So I have login DB connectivity.java file. So I have 2 Java files, and in front end I have HTML, CSS, JS, and DB, this is separate script. You have a separate script to create, insert all these stuffs, but this is separate. Okay. So what happened now? These 3 combinations has to be taken care. In jar, what happened? You had only the .java files as combined together as a archive called as jar. But now you can create your monolithic application with all these files. It can be any number of HTMLs, any number of CSS, any number of JS, any number of Java files, and any number of DB related Java files. Or you can have your own text files or CSV files, something, whatever, any kind of files, right? Which are combined together as a single archive. That is what, this is a web application. So this is called as your var. So when you package everything from the front end UI, the middleware, and the back end, all these things together is called as a var, web archive. So did you get an idea like what is web archive, what all files you have in it?
Yes, Snehal.
Okay. So now let's open up a enterprise archive. So what is the difference between enterprise archive, web archive, and jar? So the enterprise archive is similar to your web archive. Only thing is, so far, whatever you have done in the web-based application is something like combination of vars and jars and everything together in a single package called EAR. So let's say you have seen TikTok, right? Let's go with the TikTok example. Or TikTok or Insta Reels, whatever. Let's go with Insta Reels. or TikTok. Okay. So what happens? How many users do we have in Insta who uploads reels? Let's take some very much real-time information. Okay. Let's say reels video time is 30 seconds, right? Or 60 seconds. This is what the reels duration which is provided by the Insta reels. Now, how many users will be uploading? Did you know how many users will upload reels at this particular time? You have any idea?
No, we will not.
It's not
It
like
can
a
be
fixed value, right? It is a dynamic value. So since Insta is worldwide application, you never knew like how many are uploading at that point of time. And so let's say you never know how many users, but let me take an estimate of 10 million users we have in Insta. Now, how many uploads video at the time? So at the single time, let's take it as at the single time. So now the time is 8:33. 8:33 p.m. Maybe let's say among 10 million, 2 million people could have uploaded. Okay, I'm just giving a rough estimate. Could have uploaded either reels. Okay, and the data they upload, right? The reels data. Will it be in the same format? Because everyone will not have iPhone. Everyone will not have Android phones. It is a mix of all data, right? So the data, a video type, right? It can be Android video format, or it can be iPhone data format, or it can be something which has been edited in your laptop or something like AVI format, something. It can be in any data format, okay? So in the video type, it is something. But do the reels which we upload, which we see in the Instagram, should have separate format, or can it use the same format provided by the user? Hello? Janet?
Format will be different.
See, you have shot some reel video, and in your phone it was an AVI format. Okay. Now you're uploading it to Instagram. What happens? The resolution will not be as good as you uploaded it. So you need to reformat that one, whatever you have uploaded, and then post it in the Insta Reels. Or if you upload in the same format which you have, then there would be bad resolution in your video, right? So what happens? We need to take care of that format also, because see, if someone has uploaded from iPhone user, only the iPhone users who had that access to reels can go and see it. If an Android user sees that reel, the resolution will be very bad, right?
Like whatever we uploaded in iPhone, the Android user.
See, I shot a video on iPhone and I'm trying to upload that reels into Instagram. The clarity would be good if I see from my phone, but the same clarity would be available for an Android phone if I'm not formatting to a common format from Instagram, because my Instagram is my application, right? So whoever gives me input, do I need to format or use the same format?
We need to format it, right?
Yeah.
To make it format.
We need to provide a unique format so that our resolution will not be broken. The resolutions would remain same to any user, though you have uploaded from any form of data. Got it? So this is one kind of information. Now we'll see another set of use cases. So you saw the initial requirement, the reels is 30 seconds. You know like 2 million users can upload at a single time. You know the video time format. Okay. Now it is not a Java. Now you're not writing about an entire GUI. You're not creating your Instagram page. You're not creating your Instagram reel section. You're not giving the Instagram music. You're not worried about the front end itself. Okay, I'm just thinking the front end someone has done already. Now consider that you are from a developer. You're getting a request. Say, let's say this is an upload call. Okay, upload reels. This is the page. They come and upload the reels. Now the person who's uploading here, right? So let's say this is one person, this is the second person, this is third person, this is fourth person, fifth person. Everyone are trying to upload using the upload endpoint. Everyone are trying to upload. So there are multiple requests coming in the program. So this is your program. Okay. So this is your upload Java file. Let's say this is an upload Java file. Okay, let me keep this. Upload Java. So this is my upload Java file. Okay. So I got 5 requests at a time. Will I be able to handle one by one, or do I need to have something similar parallelly handling all the 5 requests together?
It should be parallelly handling.
Yeah. Why do we need to handle parallelly? If I go with sequential flow, if I'm taking this particular user, right? Let's say this is the first, sorry, what did I do? So this is say request 1. And I'm not sure whether the user, this particular user gave the request initially or he came later. But for me, now I got the request like this. So this is a request 3. And let it this be request 4. Let this be request 5. Okay. Now, if I handle all the requests one by one, R1, let it complete, upload, and then I format the data, and then save the data, save the video, and give an acknowledgement, the video uploaded successfully. So this is the flow. Okay. So this I done for first request. Now similarly I do for R2, R3, and R4 and R5. So this is pretty good. As per our requirement, we are uploading, formatting, saving the video, everything happened. But what happens if this particular user uploaded 30 seconds video, let's say the 10 seconds video to format and everything, it's taking an approximately say 3 seconds. Now, if we uploaded 30 seconds video, then it would take almost like 10 seconds max for me to complete the entire execution of this particular flow. Okay. And the same thing, I need to do it for R2, R3, R4, R5. So what happens till this particular R1 10 seconds gets completed, the number of users who are uploading at the same time has to wait. So this is like kind of queue, right? You have to wait until the first person does complete the data and go out. So you're in a waiting time. How much wait time you can give for the users? It is not a valid reason, right? Nowadays, we are all expecting less wait time. So in that case, this is like a not working solution. So for that case, what we kind to bring now here is it's parallel processing. So what we do is we create some kind of worker nodes, or you can say it as child nodes. Okay. And we give all the details, all the inputs, and we chunk the data. So what we do for the first request, when we get R1, we give this to worker 1. So if it is more than 10 seconds video, then we split it up into 3 workers. If it is only 10 seconds, I can just assign it to 1 worker. So what I'll do for the request 1. So when the worker 1, it checks the video time frame, it is 10 seconds. So it will take care of doing formatting and everything. Now the parallelly I'm getting another request. So I'm getting another request, say R2. Immediately the worker 2 comes in picture. It takes the request 2. It is uploaded with 30 seconds. So what happens? Worker 2, worker 3, worker 4 will come into picture, parse the entire video, format the data, and save it. So what happens? My R2 request has been taken control by 3 other threads. Okay, I can say it as threads. Okay, right now. So these 3 threads will come, split the data. So the entire video of 30 seconds is split into 3 parts, and each part is given to each thread to convert and format. And once we parse it, we need to reunite the data, right? Once you format it, you have 3 chunks of data now. So the one worker 2, worker 3, worker 4 has each 10 seconds video. Now you have to parse and format it together so that only then you save the video together in one place. So this all has to have some kind of connection to know that this is a request given by R2 and not some other video. So in this way, what happens, instead of doing with a sequential or linear programming, we are going into a parallel programming. So when we go into parallel programming in real time, how can we achieve parallel programming? So in this is nothing but a distributed architecture. So what is distributed architecture? Any idea?
No, see.
Okay. So distributed architecture is like, it's like a common area, common framework where everyone can access it and everyone should have equal access rate. So if I log into Instagram Reels, I should also be able to see 100 videos coming one after the another. And if you log in, you should also be able to see the one after the another. So there is no check happened. Like if I log in from India, I can see only 2 videos. And if you log in from USA, I can see only 2 videos. That shouldn't happen here. It is a kind of framework. The system, entire system works same for any number of users without any breakage. So to achieve this distributed framework, the first thing we'll consider is parallel programming. First one. So till the concept which we have learned so far in Java is thread. So you know only through Java we can achieve parallel programming. But in real time, there are multiple ways to achieve parallel programming. There are something called queues. Okay, you'll hear about it. And these queues are something like, it can be synchronous or asynchronous. What is synchronous and asynchronous? So synchronous is like one after the another. So if the request 1 comes into picture, only if the worker node completes the 10 seconds and everything is done, I would give an immediate acknowledgement, video uploaded successfully. It's a synchronous flow. What is asynchronous? It's like you come and submit a request and I'll process it and I'll say it uploaded after some time. It's not like immediately I need to give response. I can give you some time. So it's like similar to your exams. You go and write your exams, you wait for your results, and your results are not something happening immediately the day you wrote your exam, right? You get it after 10 days. So instead of having a time frame of 10 days in reality, we have a time frame delayed by either seconds or by minutes, which is not like you are waiting for the acknowledgement. You know you'll get the result, but it's not immediate result. It is something you'll get a little later, but in synchronous, you have to get it immediately. Without that response, you'll not be able to progress in your next step. Say, in this entire piece of code, once I upload the data, only if the user uploads, I can go and format. If the user upload is not successful, I can't go and format the data, right? So where I'm actually synchronized flow. So it has to be synchronized. Now, when I format it, I need to pass like based on the video time frame, I need to chunk it. I need to break them into packets. And with that package, I need to pass the entire video and then I need to upload it back. So where the say example work 2, worker node, worker 3, worker 4, it is not like worker 2 has to give me the first 10 seconds first, worker 3 has to give me the next, and worker 4 has to give me the next. It's not like it is ordered. You can give me worker 4 can give me the first output also. It's okay for me. But finally, only if I get the 3 together, I can blend it together and make the right video format. So in this case, this is not like W2, W3, W4 has to be orderly given the output, but I'm dependent on these 3 parts. Only if any 3, if all the 3 gives me the input, I'll be able to progress and save the video. If the 3 videos are not happening, it's not a complete video for me to save in database or somewhere in the storage, right? So in that purpose, we are actually like synchronously waiting for the data to be received, but in a parallel programming way. So what happens when we wanted to achieve this entire distributed architecture, we additionally introduce few frameworks inside the VAR application. So what happened here so far? You had the GUI application, which is your Instagram app or your website. Okay. Now, after that, in the middleware, let's say now you had upload API. Okay, so where you are able to upload the reels. Okay, so which is a separate Java program, right? Separate Java package. Okay, so similar to upload reels, you can go and see the feed, right? You can see Instagram pages, or you can see instead of reels, you can go and see some other profile. So view profile. So let's say this is one of the Java program, and all this view profile information would be one page. There would be something a login or register where you have login or register package. So all these are nothing but Java files. So these are all jar files. Okay? This is one jar, this is one jar, and this is one more jar. So all these are jars. Now in the middleware, this is like functionality of the Instagram. But internally, when he upload reels, I'm actually making some other logic in the backend to save the video, right? So this would be something different. So what I'll have, I have like video formatters, video formatting. So let's say video formatting, and this would be a separate jar where it has its own libraries, and it is running in a distributed platform. Maybe it is in a different platform. Maybe it is working in the AWS. I'm not sure where it is. Okay, this is a separate place. So all these together. So this is right now I'm saying it as jar. It might be in a different format. Okay, so this video formatting is in AWS. All these jars are running in the Tomcat server. So now you have Tomcat as your application to run your jar, and you have your own Glassfish server, which is your web application. Okay, so you have your web application Instagram, right? So you can actually combine your var file like jar plus your HTML things together as var, and you can launch it in your Glassfish. So this is running in say 8082, and this this upload file is running. So this is upload API, the upload endpoint, which is running in 8085. Okay, now you have something say video storage API. This is actually a place where you're connecting from your upload reels API, and there this is running in say 8089. So what happened in a similar platform, the three applications are running together, but this is a jar, this is a var, and this is again a jar. So when you combine together everything, this is called as EAR, which is Enterprise Archive. So which can have n number of vars, n number of jars, n number of DB related things, everything together, clustered together in a distributed environment, and launched is called as Enterprise Archive. So any questions so far in this?
No, Stacey.
Okay. So now let's go back here.
But you said EAR will contain multiple jars and multiple HTML, right?
Var.
Var. Then how about EAR? It is also similar to that, right? Like it contains jar and HTML only, no? EAR also.
See, var is like a combination of your front end web application related things and the backend application. Okay. Whereas in the jar, it is not like in the EAR, it is not like exactly like you'll have only web application or only jar. It will be additional things. You have middleware things also.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it is not like you'll have, to be more precise, I can say, the var will have only single web application, right? So you'll have only one deployment disk. So you haven't heard these words, so it might be new. So there's something called web.xml in your Tomcat, okay? So you'll have only one web.xml to launch your entire application of your website. So this is your Facebook or it's Instagram. You'll have just web.xml, and once you launch this in your Tomcat, you'll get the respective page loaded. Okay, so this will have all the HTMLs, static files, CSS, JS, all these things you'll have it in this particular one. Whereas in your EAR, it would be a combination of jars and the web related things like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So in var, what happens? Even your .java files will be converted into a single package as var. You will not have as a jar here. You'll have it as everything together as a var. Got it?
Okay.
So you will not have separate jar here. Instead, you have everything as .var. Whereas in EARs, you'll have any number of jars and any number of vars where you can have your respective web related things. Okay.
Okay.
So it is like if say example, this is upload.jar, as I said here, right? So you have upload.jar. So upload.jar, video formatter.jar, and login.jar. So these are the jars. Okay, these are individually called as jars. Now, if you take as a web application, you will have everything together like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and your all .java files, which is being converted into .class files, everything together, even your XML files, okay, and you have your text files, everything will be converted into a single called as Facebook.var file. Okay. Now, if you come to EAR, what happens? You have everything, all these things. And along with this, you have Facebook.var var, and it will be together called as something called insta.ear. Got it? So what happens, you are giving a chance to deploy your jar separately in some port number. This is separate port number, this is in separate port number, this is in separate port number, and together you're communicating in the form of called as EAR.
Yes, Neha.
So basically it packs more than one module. It's not like restricted to one module. It packs more than one modules. And this actually helps to deploy various modules, various applications in your application server. So there is something called as application server versus web server. Okay. So if you get an idea about these two, you can differentiate where to use EAR and where to use WAR and where to use JAR. So that we'll see slowly in our Maven related topics. But right now, are you clear with these three terms? JAR, EAR, and VAR?
Yes, Megha.
Okay. So now let's come back to Maven. So this Maven is something called as pom. So we have something called pom.xml file in Maven. So this is the base file for us to add any kind of dependencies or additional libraries, or how you want to package your Java file or Java package. Everything, like basically an instruction which has to be written for your project, will be written in your pom.xml. And this is the POM stands for Project Object Model. Okay, this is given by Apache, and we have latest versions with 3.3.6, 3.3.9, but I prefer you to go with not the latest version. With 3.3.6 should be fine for you to go ahead. Okay, so is your laptop ready?
Oh, yes, Neha.
Can you just download Apache Maven? Just go to the site Apache Maven.
Okay.
So go to this maven.apache.org. And if you are using the Windows system, go there. Or if you're using Mac, you can use the Mac related thing. If you see the prerequisites for installing the Maven system is your Java. Since you have Java in your system, try to install in the same path. Okay, like where you have the C program files Java, have a package created for your Maven as well. So I'll show you that. So before that, so if you see the latest version, you have 3.8.4, right? So these are the releases which has been done. And in this, I request you to download something called as zip and not as a checksums or signature. Okay, so let me show you the path where your Maven has to be created. If you see here, you're able to see my screen?
Oh, yes, Neha.
So in C program files, I have Apache Maven. I also have the Java. So in this Apache Maven, I install 3.6.3. So if you're able to get 6.3, I would like okay. But if you're, because the other versions are not that stable enough to be used, so you might end up with complications or conflicts whenever you download any kind of jars, right? So I prefer you to go with this 3.6 if you can download. And in this, what happens, you have to install it under program files. It's a zip file. Once you download, extract and install it under program files.
Okay. Like where we placed our JRE, JDK, the Java folder, right? So,
So you see program files, you have something called Java, right? Where you have installed your JDK and JRE. So same way under program files, where when you try to extract it, try to extract under the same C program files, and that gets installed as Apache-Maven. Okay, where you can see the internally these things. Don't try to install more than one Maven, because you might again end up with mapping issues, because both are in the same package. So you might have issues like how you had in your JDK. So what we need to do, once you install in Apache Maven, open your environment variables. So here you have to create something called m2 under home, okay, underscore home, and you have to give the path where you have installed your Maven, like C program files, Maven, right? You have to give the path. And m2 repo, this I'll tell again. You also create the same thing called Maven underscore home, because when you try to install Tomcat, it will expect something called Maven home. And for few of the applications, it will expect a name called m2 home. So to avoid that, I'm actually asking you to create both m2 underscore home and Maven underscore home, pointing to C program files, Apache Maven, and where you have your root. No need of bin or something. Just create till the home path. Okay. So,
You mean M2 home and Maven home both should be same path, or it should be different?
yeah, it's like 2 key, but the same value. So m2 home, Maven underscore home. And you have to have the Maven directory path where you have the package. Okay. This is the first step you need to do after downloading it. So have you started downloading it?
Like when I open Zoom, right? So my system is getting hanged. So that's why I'm not able to connect to Zoom.
Okay, fine. But try to install it by tomorrow because we need
yeah.
to work on this. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So have this m2 underscore home variable. Please note it down. Maybe I can share it.
Yeah, I've noted down, but in your environment variable, I could see as two different parts actually.
No, yeah, that is different. Yeah, so don't need to worry about that. But try to have same path for both the things.
Both the things. Okay.
Yeah. Next thing is you need to have something called repo. Okay. So if you see, there is m2 underscore repo. So you have to create that variable. And where did I create that path? So if you see this m2 underscore repo, this is again, I need to create .m2 folder, which in the same, wherever you wanted all your dependencies to be installed. So let me show you where this actually looks like. Okay. So this would be the structure. Okay. You have to create a repo in the place where you wanted to store all your dependencies. Either you want in C path or if you want in D path, wherever you want, have some directory created called .m2. So create a directory .m2. Like how do you create in a Unix system, right? Just create the same way. So you can just make directory .m2. And within that, you should have something called repository and settings.xml. So now create another directory within it, which is repository. Create a directory again within that. And you can see this settings.xml file. Okay, this is something which you get from your Maven installation. Okay, the same thing which you got from your Maven installation. And in this, you have something called local repository. Okay, so right now, wherever you have installed your repository, that would be the path. And if you see the local repository is from my name, from my path .m2.repository. There will be like remote repository and all. We'll see each terminologies in the next classes. But right now, you just need to create a directory called .m2, and within that is a directory called repository. And this settings.xml is something you can fetch it from your Apache Maven. So you see here, there's a file here. See, the same thing. Whenever you install under conf, okay. So under this conf, you will have the settings.xml. Just recopy it here in the .m2 file. Even if you don't copy, it won't create issue. But sometimes our systems might behave weirdly. So it's always better to have settings.xml here. Because when you're working in an organization, you might have multiple repositories where you have multiple jars and dependencies to be downloaded. So in that case, it's preferable to maintain this one. Otherwise, it's not a mandatory deal. Okay. So are we good till here? Like m2 home and m2 repo is the path where you have created .m2. So are we good till here?
.m2, it can be any folder, even our D drive or wherever
You can
want.
create .m2 your wish. You can create it anywhere before it, C or D drive, but you need to have something called .m2 and you have to map it to the repository. So this should be the path you have to give under m2.repo. So before that, it can be anything. Okay. But this should be again in the program files where you have your Java, right? The same.
Java.
Now, once you have done with your all these part, you need to create something in the path variable. So as we did in the Java thing, right? Bin package, the same thing, you need to go to the path variable and you can see here something added, right? I just added the bin as we did for Java home. Okay. So you need to just add this in your path variable. Okay. So this would be the setup for your Maven. Got it?
Yes.
Yeah. So try to do this setup, complete it, and we'll be working on how to import and everything from tomorrow. Okay. So right now, just do the setup. And let's see why we need Maven and what is the difference between Maven and Gradle, also a detailed better way by tomorrow. But a basic idea what this Maven looks like. So I'll just give you a sample of a pom.xml. I'll show you a sample pom.xml and that can give you a betterment of ideas. So let's see the structure. So you can see something called this is an XML file, okay? So this is a project, is an XML file, and every XML file will have something called artifact ID, group ID, and version, okay? So this is like kind of a unique combination whenever you're trying to deploy it, right? So what happens, you can just go and deploy 2.2.7.release. And if you're upgrading it to some other version, what you can upgrade is 2.2.8, or if you're trying to give us a new version, not as a dot versions, like it's not a hot fix or something, it's a new release, new feature, then you can go with 3 point something. So it is all, the versioning is something which we have in control. So this is like every artifact, group, and version is something, each one will have it. So let's say, so all the dependencies, right? So how do we add? If we don't have the jar files, how do we add it from explicitly? So you just need to bring this annotation or a tag called dependency. And within that, you again have group ID, artifact ID, and the version. Leave about the scope right now. So this is the 3 parameters which you need to add again. So let's say, where do these jars get loaded? So if you go into this .m2 under repository, you can see, right, multiple libraries are getting downloaded. Let me go into JavaX. So in JavaX, I have something called mail. Under mail API, I have something called version, and under version, I have my jar. So this is the executable jar. So where it got downloaded, it downloaded in your local repository. So there are 2 kinds of repositories in Maven. One is local and the other one is remote. So whenever you're trying to execute in your own system, like you're developing it for the first time, then you have all your dependencies in local. And when you're trying to deploy it into a cloud platform or a Docker or Kubernetes or somewhere else, what happens, we create this entire Maven setup in that particular server and we keep it as a remote, and whoever is trying to access those jars will have a direct connectivity to that particular remote repository, and they don't need to download every time from to the local system, right? So we are making it like available in one common location, and so that we don't need to waste memory for these jars. Okay, so where exactly these jars will be loaded? So if you see here, okay, so if you see, I can see an n number of jars here, right? Where are these jars coming from? So under libraries, like there is something called JRE system library where you have all your JDK related jars like runtime jar, or you have your Sun jars, everything under this JRE library. Now we are going to add our Maven dependency. So whatever you add as part of your dependency tag, everything will be downloaded and available in your local system. And you can see all these jars are available. So how you had your runtime jars or util package, everything, same way we have all these jars, and all these are nothing but again your dot class files. Okay. So if you see, this is one kind of jar, and this had n number of packages, and n number of packages had n number of dot class files. So this is your jar. Okay. So there is something called var. We'll see the var creation little later when we start the web development. But right now, jar is nothing but a group of Java classes packaged in a single thing. So that whenever you want to execute, you can execute only this jar. We'll see tomorrow how to execute a jar normally and through Maven and all these stuffs by tomorrow. But right now, what we're doing is, we are not, so what happened in the earlier days, what we do is, we download this jar from Google, or we have everything stored in one place. We create a path similar to this repositories, okay? We have something in our local, we download everything, all these jars, and we explicitly add them in the libraries, new, and you go, sorry. So there's a build path, configure build path, and once you go to the configure build path, there's something called libraries. Here you can see add jars, add external jars, right? So we go into this and we down whatever jars you had in this particular repository. Let's say this is the one I'm having. I'll just select this and I open, and then I'll upload that jar. So whatever jars I wanted for my application to run, I download from the Google, and I add it explicitly to that application and save it. So what was the problem? If you have 100 jars, you have to download 100 jars into your local system. You have to maintain those 100 jars. You never knew whether those 100 jars were upgraded, or they were the fresh jars, or they were like pretty new, or they're old. We never knew. If you have downloaded, you still use the same thing. You have recently observed an attack called this one, right? Log4j attack. You remember? A serious issue happened. The severity was very, very high. I mentioned in the classes also, right? This reason
of the class you mentioned.
Yeah. So what happened? There was a similar issue. The legacy applications, right? Whoever were following the old traditional method, who doesn't have this Maven approach, what way they have done? They have downloaded the jars externally. They would have 1.0 or 2.0 versions, and they were not upgraded. Since it was giving the functionality for them to log, they were using the older versions, and everything were downloaded explicitly and linked to the application. So for you, everything was good. But the hackers know that this is actually a risk application, and they come into picture, and whoever has logged any kind of confidential data would have been leaked. So that was the reason it was marked as severe zero severity, that you have to fix it in a day and you have to push your changes if it's your application, it's a production application. So there was a higher risk in that. So what happened? To avoid such kind of memory wastage every time to download your jars, and you never know your application is like having the latest versions or not. And if you in your local, if your system is crashed and you don't have those jars locally, what happens? Your application will not run. It is completely stopped, right? So in that case, there are huge problems for maintaining these things. Like if you are trying to create your own application in some other server, you have to transfer each individual jar to that into that particular server. Only then your application will be launched, it will run. Otherwise, it will not run. So which is a huge problem for developers, as well as like to switch from one server to another server, or to have any kind of backup servers. So to avoid such things, Maven has come into picture and said that if you want it to be installed locally, I give you that freedom. If you don't want to install locally and you want to have everything in one place, so that in future, if I migrate my application to multiple servers also, I don't need to worry about the relevant jars which has to be downloaded. I just go into the settings.xml file, and instead of having it as local repository, I'll have something called global repository. So if you see, this is a local repository. Right now it is pointing to my system. Instead, I'll map it to a remote repository. Okay, this is right now in my local. So let me show it in the this particular one. So if you see here, this is having a repository, and what I'm doing is I'm fetching all the data from some other source. Remote repository is like it's not in the local. It's somewhere in the backend in some other server. I'm just using that particular path and downloading all the jars which I wanted it. So whatever dependencies I have mentioned in this particular file, like say example, where is the dependencies? Yeah. So if you say this is JHipster, Kafka, so some kind of dependencies, right? All this we loaded from my repository. Say this is the repository from Artifactory. So you can either maintain in a common repositories like Artifactory or JFrog, or you can have Nexus or something like that, or you can store in a separate server and then you can even map that URL too. Okay, so basically you're not saving any of the jar or var files in your local. You're fetching it from some other third party and using it to run your application. So there is no wastage of creating your jars locally. So that is the reason whenever you deploy this or start your application in your system, all your jars are downloaded at that particular time and which are not in your system. So how you generate your .class files? Same way, all your dependencies get loaded when you're doing it for the first time in your system locally. And after that, it will reuse it. So the installation time is also very, very minimal. Okay. Got an idea about Maven?
Yes,
so just a basic idea, like instead of downloading it and installing it in your application, we are not downloading it explicitly to avoid the memory store, to reduce the memory storage in your systems, and we are pointing it to some other framework called Artifactory or Nexus to get it loaded at runtime.
So that means we will just point to the remote repository only. We will not point to the local repository.
Yeah, if you are, see, if it's some application you're developing from scratch for the first time, then you need to have it in your local, right? To test your application, to build your application. Then in that cases, you have your local repositories created like under .m2. Okay. So this is something you do in your system locally to create it. Once you create it and you want to publish it, then in that case, what we do, we have all these jars, whatever you're right now, if say you're using mail API -1.4.3 jar, I just don't go into that particular Artifactory, upload that jar, and I just give this path. And in the dependency, I'll just say that, the mail application path, right? So javax.mail.mail API, and I'll just give mail API and the version 1.4.3. That's it. So this dependency will help me to fetch the jar from the remote path which I have given in the repository. So what happens, I don't need to download it in local. It will take care when you run your application on the server itself. You don't need to transfer all your jars from your local to server. Everything will be taken care there once you upload. So it's a single click. So once you upload, you can reuse it anytime.
Okay.
Okay. So this is what the Maven is all about. So yeah. So try to remember all the concepts which we learned in file handling, scanner, buffer reader, collections, everything. So tomorrow we'll be working on a use case of reading and writing CSV file, parsing it, formatting it, everything using Java API, as well as using a third-party libraries called OpenCSV. And we'll try to do a similar one on Excel also, because Excel reading and parsing is different from a CSV reading and writing. So we'll see a similar application. And with this, we'll implement the thread concept. So you will be learning Maven in these classes along with the other functionalities, and then we'll go ahead with the thread concept. Okay. Any questions so far?
No, Sneha.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
It's able to use the version 3.6.3, right? But I
No,
could,
anything less than 3.8. Take the latest version less than 3.8. If you have 3.7, take it. If you have 3.6, take it. But 3.8 is, I don't prefer, it's a stable version 8 because we are not using Java 1.9 or 11.8, right? So we are still in 1.8 only in our systems. So I'm not sure like how compatible are they now. So I prefer you to go with 3.6 or 3. Okay, if you don't have any other option, go with 3.8. But if you have any complications later, we need to see that.
okay, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Just inform Kiriba also like to install this Maven part. Just to give a reminder before tomorrow class. Because you said like you'll not be joining tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow he said he will not be available.
Hmm. So it's better if someone has so that it will be easy for me because I have it already installed. So if someone installs, it will be easy for us to learn together.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Have a good day. If you have no questions, we can wind up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.